Join me as I narrate the unforeseen story of the moment my daughter's fiancé caught me in the midst of a rather awkward situation. I sincerely appreciate your time spent watching the video and for sharing your thoughts in the comments. Your kindness means a great deal to me. The tale will unfold once more in the near future, so keep your eyes peeled. His presence nearby had gone unnoticed by me. It was only after I straightened, water still clinging to my thighs, steam rising against the mirror like smoke from a fire already ignited, that I reached for the towel, the worn piece with the tattered edge, the one I consistently choose when the house lies silent. Having just stepped out of the shower, I stand bare and unashamed, my skin radiant and soft to the touch. I adjusted my posture, fingers weaving through my wet strands, and in that moment, I noticed the silhouette hovering in the entrance. He discovered himself adrift in a timeless expanse, his fingers clasping the doorknob, ensnared in a fleeting moment of tranquility. He was never intended to be in this place. He ought not to have been looking at me like that. I, too, found myself paralyzed, drawing in a deep breath, yet releasing nothing. At first, my body betrayed me. I stood vulnerable, resisting the urge to grasp the towel. I gazed at him, feeling his eyes roam over my figure with a warmth that wrapped around me. His name hung in the air, caught in my throat. Julian, the fiancé of my daughter, her cherished golden child, the one who had addressed me as ma'am in our first 3 meetings. I sincerely apologize. His voice quivered, deep and almost raspy, yet he stood resolute. His gaze lingered, his eyes descended, and yet I stood unmoving. I permitted him to look. A fragment of my being longed for him to do so. It was a brief instant, maybe 3 seconds or 4, before he shut the door with a firm thud, and I could hear his footsteps quickly receding into the distance. The corridor wrapped around him, but my heart continued to ache with unease. My hand trembled as I wrapped myself in the towel, gripping it firmly against my chest, as though I could somehow hold back the tempest of events that had just transpired. I should have felt a pang of shame. Instead, I felt a surge of vitality. That night, I found myself in bed, grappling with my thoughts long after I would have preferred to admit. I closed my eyes, striving to focus on the soft whir of the ceiling fan, the distant hum of traffic, and the soothing rhythm of my husband's snore resonating down the hallway. Yet all I could feel was the warmth blooming on my cheeks, the fluttering in my stomach, the persistent thrum between my thighs. I clenched my legs together, wrestling with the memory of Julian's gaze, which felt as though it traced every contour of my skin, lingering on my lips and on the part of me he had no claim to, yet had seen all too clearly. The next morning, he averted his gaze from mine. I was unable to do so as well. He sat at the kitchen island, watching my daughter engrossed in her phone. She remained blissfully ignorant. She hummed gently, a beacon of joy as she spoke of wedding menus and seating arrangements, while Julian stared into his coffee, as though it contained the allure of an escape. I placed a plate in front of him, and our fingers brushed against one another, a fleeting touch that lingered in the air. It was just a brush of knuckles, yet the spark that ignited between us nearly took my breath away. Even in silence, the air between us crackled with unspoken thoughts as I crossed paths with him again in the hallway that afternoon. His hand brushed against my hip, both gentle and purposeful, a soft suggestion of desire in the caress. The feeling persisted, stretching into an endless expanse of time. I comforted myself with the notion that it bore no importance. On that particular evening, my husband was deeply engrossed in his work, the darkness of night enveloping us as the sun slipped below the horizon. My daughter lingered in her room, immersed in a FaceTime conversation. The house was shrouded in silence. As I descended the stairs, I filled a glass with wine, my bare feet gliding over the cool floor, still enveloped in the silk slip that lingered beneath my robe. Julian occupied the living room, his eyes locked onto the screen, the sound silenced. He lifted his eyes as I entered the room. His lips parted with the faintest hint of anticipation. I found myself teetering on the edge of yielding to sleep. I observed. He nodded, yet his body remained motionless. I did not either. An electric tension hung in the air, a tangible weight that cloaked the surroundings. As I approached the counter, a sense of anticipation hung in the air. He stood up and moved toward me with a measured slowness, his steps almost languorous. "You looked beautiful," he murmured, his voice a soft caress in the stillness. This morning, a tightness seized my throat. "Julian, I never meant to look so deeply." I simply found myself unable to stop. I swallowed hard. "I truly believe you ought to reconsider that statement," I murmured softly. I acknowledged that he inhaled life. Then his hand brushed against my arm, a mere whisper of a touch. I turned to face him directly. His gaze lingered on my lips before drifting lower. I did not withdraw. Instead, he leaned in nearer. I permitted him to draw near, and as his lips gently met mine, an unmistakable tension lingered in the atmosphere, both thrilling and daunting. He kissed me as though it were a secret he had started to mourn. As his hand slipped beneath the hem of my slip, exploring the bare skin between my thighs, a gasp escaped his lips. "I shouldn't," he murmured. "Yet you are already that," I remarked. His fingers emanated a gentle warmth, filled with curiosity. They rose, brushing the periphery, lightly touching the inner part of my thigh, as if he were ensnared in a fragile ballet of intrigue and withdrawal. My breath hitched in my throat as his knuckle grazed the spot that was already slick with eagerness. He remained motionless, ensnared in a fleeting moment of incredulity, his eyes lifted. "You're not wearing anything beneath this," he whispered gently. A fusion of curiosity and doubt. I noted that it was scarcely perceptible. I had not foreseen that anyone would notice my presence. He exhaled in a slow, wavering manner, as if he were drowning in the depths, and I represented his last gasp of existence. Once again, our lips lingered in silence, untouched. This is not the first occurrence. He remained close, his hand resting against me, as though he struggled to comprehend my presence, apprehensive that I might vanish if he moved too abruptly. "Please, just tell me to stop," he murmured softly. I did not. I found myself unable to do so. I reached out to his wrist, delicately guiding his fingers to the exact spot I sought. His fingers moved over me, slow and hesitant, as though he were uncovering something divine. My head tilted back, her lips slightly parted, a soft whisper of breath escaping. "Oh dear." He emitted a soft groan, urging, "Please, refrain from uttering that statement. It will surely lead to my undoing." As my fingers grazed his, an electric thrill surged through me, my thighs trembling, breath caught in a tight grip within my chest. I clung to the edge of the counter, a frantic effort to stave off the impending collapse to the floor. He stood motionless, his eyes locked onto my face, as though it were the most authentic thing he had ever come across. I pulled him into a kiss, charged with a longing that made me quiver, deeply intense, startlingly quick, teetering on the edge of a fire that threatened to engulf us both. His body pressed against mine, solid and yearning, and I instinctively reached down, my fingers curling around him through the fabric of his jeans. He breathed into my mouth. "This is not a path we should follow. We are already entangled in it." On that particular night, we decided against pushing forward. A door slammed shut on the upper floor, and her voice floated down, light and carefree, carrying a purity that echoed the innocence I once held dear. We drew back from each other. I made a subtle shift to my slip, and he pulled back, his hand grazing his jeans, his chest rising and falling with quickened breaths. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I misspoke, expressing myself too hastily and with excessive openness. He locked his eyes onto mine for a fleeting moment, then turned and left without a word. Sleep eluded me, leaving me restless in the quiet of the night. The sheets cocooned me in an uneasy embrace, my skin radiating an excess of warmth. Awake and alert, I became aware of the soft resonance of her laughter wafting through the wall. With every flutter of my eyelids, his image materialized at the peak of my ecstasy. I found myself reliving it, drawing in each breath, relishing every caress, until the boundaries between guilt and desire faded into obscurity. The days that ensued were characterized by a disquieting stillness, a hush that left me alert and restless. He maintained his distance, positioning himself on the far side of the room, opting to leave the dishes in the sink instead of handing them to me. Yet, I could feel his gaze, a constant presence, always lingering, always observing, as if his body held an instinctive awareness while his mind stubbornly clung to denial. One afternoon, as I meticulously folded laundry in the guest room, he passed by with an effortless grace, his hand brushing against my waist, just enough to stir something within me. I stood firm, permitting the moment to evolve, our silence morphing into a distinct language, heavy with unexpressed thoughts, an unvoiced inquiry that hung in the air, one we both hesitated to articulate. Then arrived the evening she departed for her bachelorette weekend. 3 days, just the two of us. The house loomed larger, its silence resonating with an unexpected intensity. I prepared a modest dish and uncorked a bottle of wine. I was certain she would not fail to hit her mark. He entered the kitchen without shoes, clad in a soft gray shirt that hugged his chest. His hair clung to his forehead, and his eyes held a deeper shade than normal. He remained silent, merely pouring a glass, taking a seat opposite me, and observing as I ate, as if he were yearning for something far beyond the meal. As I rose to carry my plate to the sink, he trailed behind me, neither through words nor through uncertainty. He leaned in his chest warm against my back, lips grazing my shoulder while his hand wrapped around my waist. "I can't shake the sound of your voice," he murmured. "As your presence graced my fingertips, my knees gave way beneath me." I clutched the counter Julian. He spun me around, pressing his lips against mine with a languid tenderness, more profound this time without a doubt. Then he lifted me effortlessly onto the counter, parting my knees with both hands, kissing the inside of my thigh with a reverence that felt both sacred and forbidden. He whispered, his tongue already teasing, "You taste just as I imagined." Sweet and perilous, I breathed, fingers tangled in his hair, as he brought me to ecstasy once more. His mouth lost in me, as if he would perish in that moment. As he rose, my fingers trembled as I unbuckled his belt, releasing him from his confines. He felt warm and substantial in my grasp, already oozing. I caressed him softly, savoring the way his hip quivered forward, the way his jaw tightened. "What is it that you desire?" I murmured softly. "You," he said. "I desire each and every one of you." He took me right there on the counter, a single profound thrust that took my breath away. I entwined my legs around him, my arms draping over his neck. Our foreheads touched, a gentle connection as he entered me, slow and profound, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. We remained silent, yet our movements spoke volumes. The sound of the wine glass clinking softly behind me mingled with the subtle hum of the fridge, while his quiet moans escaped with each tightening embrace I offered. I returned once more, feeling utterly powerless, and he trailed behind me, releasing a jagged, broken cry against my neck. After we remained entwined for what felt like an eternity, his head nestled against my shoulder, his breath still a rhythm of unevenness. "We find ourselves in a predicament," he remarked. "I am aware, and I have no desire to cease. I am aware of that as well." The following morning I chose not to evade him, though perhaps I should have. Instead, I brewed 2 cups of coffee, placing his on the counter in silence. Without uttering a single word, he emerged a few minutes later, barefoot once more. His eyes still heavy with the remnants of sleep, he glanced at the cup, then turned his gaze to me, offering no smile, just a subtle nod, as if we were silent accomplices, burdened by our shared secret, trapped in an unspoken pact. I took a sip, leaning casually against the counter. He sipped his drink, casting furtive glances at my collarbone. The unspoken events of the previous night lingered in the air, palpable and weighty, filling the silence that enveloped us. Each time his hand grazed mine by the sink, I felt an irresistible pull to stay close more than was necessary, posing questions that required no answers, volunteering assistance for tasks he could easily manage alone. He allowed it, his gaze trailing after me as I exited the room. He lingered too near as we crossed paths in the hallway. Once I let a spoon slip from my grasp, and as we both leaned down to retrieve it, our faces hovered mere inches apart, caught in a moment where neither of us dared to move. The fragrance of his skin lingered in the air, a soft, clean aroma that had already permeated my pillow. The night prior, I can't recall who made the first move, but our lips met once more, swift and fervent. reminiscent of youthful lovers hidden away behind a closed door. That evening we abandoned all pretense. It all began in the hallway, a fleeting look, a lingering caress, and then fingers tugging at fabric before thoughts could take shape. He pressed me softly against the wall, his mouth and eager hands exploring. "You're the only thought that occupies my mind," he whispered, "from dawn till dusk. Even in her embrace, my heart longs for you." I ought to have intervened, have urged him to go, yet I found myself unzipping his jeans, my hand encircling him, warm and already eager, as he let out a groan into my mouth, as if he had been stifling it for hours. He lifted my leg around his waist, his fingers gliding between my thighs. Sensing the warmth of my desire, "Jesus," he murmured, "your essence cascades for me." I let out a soft moan, my body arching in response. From the moment our eyes met in that mirror, "I've longed for you." That shattered him. He swept me up, traversing the hallway with purpose, and nudged the guest room door ajar with the strength of his shoulder. As soon as we collapsed onto the bed, we became entwined, our mouths, skin, and limbs merging in an insatiable desire to devour one another. He immersed himself in me swiftly. This time there will be no playful jabs, no inquiries made. With open arms I embraced each inch, each thrust that sent the headboard colliding with the wall. He groaned, overwhelmed by the intensity of the sensation. "You feel too good. I fear I won't endure much longer." "Then don't," I gasped. "Simply hand it over to me." He grasped my hands above my head, his hips colliding with mine, sweat gathering between us, breath transforming into something raw and instinctual. We united as if we were attempting to submerge ourselves in one another. In the aftermath, we found ourselves enveloped in silence, our gazes fixed upon the ceiling above. His hand grasped mine. "We have 2 more nights," he remarked. I chose to remain silent. I was already aware that I would savor every moment with them. The following day, I drew back the curtains to reveal a tempest outside. The rain patters softly against the windows, while the wind sways the trees in a graceful dance. A photograph arrived from my daughter, capturing the essence of the coast, radiant sun, golden sand, and beaming smiles. I lingered on her smile, captivated beyond what was appropriate. She resembled the version of myself that existed before the weight of regret settled in. As dusk settled, I ventured into the embrace of the rain. I craved the coolness of the air, a refreshing touch against my skin. I descended the porch stairs barefoot, stepping into the yard. Allowing the water to drench my shirt and cling to my skin, I stood there, a figure enveloped in the heavy shroud of remorse. In that moment, I sensed his presence looming behind me. The door clicked shut, his footsteps muffled by the damp grass beneath him. "Why do you continue to let me in?" he inquired. "Because I am weary of feigning that I am not ravenous." His hand extended toward me, fingertips brushing against the drenched material at my waist, drawing me closer to him. Our bodies glistened slick and scarcely adorned. His lips sought mine with a languid intensity, plunging deeper into the moment. He stripped the shirt from my body beneath the rain, sinking to his knees, his lips tracing the contours of my stomach, my hip, my thigh. "I want to ensure I do this correctly," he stated, and he indeed did. He gently placed me on the damp grass, and we embraced each other as if eternity stretched before us. It ought to have concluded beneath the downpour that evening, yet it lingered on. In the aftermath, we found ourselves teetering on the edge of recklessness. Or perhaps it was simply a newfound boldness that propelled us forward. We held the conviction that desire rendered us invincible, that it possessed the power to construct a refuge resilient enough to withstand the impending collapse. We ceased our vigil for the night, for the hush, for the sealed entrances. As I stepped into the pantry, I drew him in alongside me, a spark igniting when his hand grazed my lower back while I reached for the sugar. I kissed him as if I craved for him to melt into my very being. He hoisted me onto a shelf, raised my skirt, and his fingers were inside me before I could even draw a breath. "You're always ready for me," he whispered, his voice quivering as I sank my teeth into his shoulder. "You have a way of making me lose sight of everything around me," and I longed for that escape, if only for a fleeting moment. We advanced in a close-knit hush, breathless and alert, my sound consumed as he pressed his lips against mine. We didn't quite reach the end. A sudden knock on the kitchen door sent us darting away like startled teenagers, yet the lingering ache remained long after he had zipped up and exited as if nothing had transpired. I began to feel a growing resentment for the distance that lingered between our touches, an insatiable longing for the sound of his voice, even in moments when I was not enveloped in his embrace. We would encounter one another in the most unexpected of locales. The back seat of his car rested at the fringe of the woods, the stairwell, shortly after twilight. In the desolate upstairs guest bathroom, I sank to my knees, taking him into my mouth with a deliberate slowness that nearly drove him to madness. "You're not real," he breathed, his gaze fixed on the way I moved. "You are a vision that will surely unravel me." As he arrived, I consumed it all, locking my gaze with his. I yearned for him to etch it into his memory for all time. Yet dreams are fleeting. On the second morning of her return, everything shifted. She hummed once more, spinning gracefully in the kitchen, her cheeks aglow with a vibrant light. He perched beside her at the island, nodding, his smile stretching too wide. I observed them from the sink, soap suds clinging to my hands, my heart clawing at my chest. I beheld it, her fingers brushed against his, the manner in which he withdrew just a fraction, and I was aware she sensed it as well. The betrayal has not come to pass. Not just yet, yet the transition, the elusive fragment. The deception festered in the space, much like decay hidden beneath the floorboards. That evening, I ascended to his quarters. In the corridor I lingered until she stepped into the shower, the sound of music filling the air, humming a tune that I found unbearable. I seized his wrist, drawing him into the shadows of the guest room, pinning him against the door. Once more I murmured softly. He refrained from inquiring about the reason. He kissed me as if he had been deprived for an eternity. "I can't." "Stop," he murmured, his lips brushing against mine. "Then don't," I had already whispered. With my back turned to the door, I gripped his belt and rode him. His lips brushed against my shoulder, my fingers entwined in his hair. The slightest creak of the floorboards beneath us heightened the sense of peril in the air. Incredibly captivating. "You're going to destroy me," he lamented. "You have already mentioned that." I gasped for breath. "And I have already accomplished that." We hurried onward, urgency propelling us, as if we were fleeing the inevitable repercussions. We sensed that we were closing the gap. As I arrived, I sank my teeth into his shoulder to stifle my cries. He came moments later, immersing himself fully and quaking with intensity. In the silence that followed, not a single word was exchanged between us. We lingered in the shadows, gasping and shattered, the stillness enveloping us, heavy with inevitability, yet we were not as silent as we had imagined. On the following morning she had transformed, chillier, more subdued. She prepared the coffee in silence. She refrained from making any contact with him, and when she cast her gaze upon me, it was devoid of suspicion. It felt as though I had become a mere echo, fading away from her heart, even if she remained unaware of the reason. That evening I found myself alone in my room, the door securely fastened behind me. I gazed at my reflection in the mirror, bare beneath the fabric of a robe. I did not secure it. I followed the impressions on my thighs, remnants of his grip that was perhaps a touch too fierce. I brushed my fingers against the spot where his lips had lingered before quietly making my way into the hallway. I held back my tears not at this moment. Yet, I sensed an accumulation akin to a tempest looming at the periphery of all we had created. He rapped softly, a tentative sound echoing in the stillness. I chose not to respond. In that stillness, a sense of farewell lingered. In the air, he did not return that night. No gentle tap. Silence holds no secrets. In the shadows, no fingers wander along my hip. I lingered in anticipation, not remaining still, but moving about, pacing, sitting, standing, opening the door only to shut it once more. The stillness was excruciating, not due to the absence of his touch, but rather from the dread of what that absence signified. Perhaps he had selected her. Perhaps guilt had ultimately triumphed. Perhaps he possessed a strength that surpassed my own. I yearned to feel the heat of anger within me. Yet, all I experienced was a profound emptiness, as if he had departed with fragments of me I hadn't realized I had surrendered. The following day, he completely steered clear of me. He settled beside her once more, allowing her to rest against him. His lips curled into a smile as she revealed something on her phone. I lingered in the kitchen, observing them as if I were an outsider. She extended an invitation for coffee. Her voice carried a melodic sweetness, yet her eyes were not. They observed me closely, evaluated my dimensions, as if she possessed a secret knowledge, or perhaps something more ominous. She sensed a stirring deep within her, anticipating the validation she sought. I stumbled through my gratitude and exited the room, heart pounding in my chest, a warning drum echoing through my veins. That afternoon, he discovered me amidst the blooms of the garden. I found myself feigning the act of pruning the lavender, yet my hands trembled uncontrollably. He knelt beside me, his voice barely above a whisper. "We must bring this to a halt." I averted my gaze from him. "You have already accomplished that." His hand brushed against mine, softly reminiscent of remorse. "It has transcended my desires." A soft, bitter laugh escaped my lips, tinged with a sense of brokenness. It was never meant to be. It revolved around what we had taken, what was essential, not what was just. He gazed at the earth that lay between us. "Last night she inquired about my happiness." I halted momentarily. "What did you imply? That I was untruthful?" Once more, he appeared before me under the cloak of night. He remained silent. "I have just entered my room." Once the house fell into silence, I found myself nestled in bed. Rose-blue eyes were wide open. He settled in next to me, and I instinctively leaned into him. Our lips never met. Not immediately. He simply held me, his face nestled against my neck. My fingers quivered as they brushed against my ribs. "She is aware of his whisper." I inclined my head in agreement. She remained silent on the matter. "Not at this moment, yet it exists, in the spaces that lie between each word." We did not share an intimate moment. This is not the first time. We clung to one another, a quiet desperation enveloping us, as if we were preparing for the impending chaos. His lips finally met mine. A languid, melancholic, and perilous embrace. His hands glided over my body, as if etching the farewell into his very being. I made way for him, allow him to enter, and as he entered me, it was neither forceful nor untamed. It was profoundly devastating. He moved with a deliberate slowness, as if he understood that this would be the final moment I would allow anyone to penetrate my depths. I entwined my legs around him, my nails trailing softly down his back. Our foreheads touched, and he murmured words that tightened my throat. "You brought me into focus. You caused me to lose my memory." Fear gripped me. "You were never merely an error." I arrived in silence, gaze unblinking locked onto his, and when he arrived, he uttered my name as if it were a secret unveiled. He lingered until the first light of dawn began to break, glided away like a whisper in the night. The following day, she met my gaze with a directness that was both disarming and enchanting, her smile illuminating the moment. Yet it lacked authenticity. In that moment, I understood that the deepest form of heartbreak arises when a person possesses the truth, but remains paralyzed, uncertain of how to act upon it. She invited me to join her for lunch. Only the two of us, not Julian. Abandon all phones. She expressed that she felt my absence keenly, yearned for moments shared with her mother. We found ourselves seated at a quaint little cafe, a place she cherished during her high school days. In those initial moments, everything felt nearly ordinary. She spoke of the wedding favors hues, the blossoms that danced in her thoughts. I inclined my head in agreement, smiled at just the right moments, yet I sensed her gaze upon me with an intensity that was almost palpable, as if she were constructing a grand design. And then in the midst of her words she paused. She placed her fork gently on the table. She placed her hands delicately on the table, fingers intertwined. When she spoke again, her voice was steady, yet it lacked gentleness. "Are you sharing your bed with him?" I stood still, my body paralyzed in that moment. The cafe surrounding us was in a constant state of flux, the soft sound of plates gently clinking together. Laughter fills the air, yet I continued onward. It felt as though my entire existence was distilled into the depths of her gaze. What I softly murmured, yet she refrained from asking once more. She was aware that I perceived it in the tension of her jawline, in the manner she remained unblinking. Just tell me, she urged. Please, I would appreciate it if you could respond without further prompting. I parted my lips, sealed it shut. My fingers quivered delicately at the rim of my glass. I might have chosen to deceive. One might have engaged in gaslighting. She might have insisted that her fears were merely the product of an overactive imagination. However, I chose not to, for the truth had been swelling within her, a silent scream waiting to be unleashed. And I could no longer keep it at bay. I didn't mean to, I murmured softly. Indeed, her gaze lingered on me, stretching into an eternity, and there was an essence within her. A gentle crack echoed through the air. What is the duration? Ever since you departed that weekend. Her hands tightened into fists whenever I spoke of him. Each time I expressed my love for him. You were fully prepared. She came to a halt, turned my gaze aside. I hadn't intended for it to unfold this way, I remarked. Yet you allowed it to unfold, she repeated with increasing intensity. Within the walls of my home alongside my fiancé, I am aware of what I previously stated. I am fully aware of my actions. She rose to her feet. I shifted in curiosity, yet she remained indifferent. With a swift motion, she seized her bag and keys, uttering a single sentence. It will remain etched in my memory forever. You are no longer my mother. She stepped outside, did not look back. I lingered at the table long after the check had arrived. I returned to a house that felt only partially filled with life. Julian was gone. She was gone. The wedding has been called off. Her father remained silent, offering no questions. He departed just 2 weeks later. He claimed he had forgotten how to love me. I mentioned that I had been an outsider for many years. Yet, he remained oblivious until the moment had slipped away. The guest room has become my sanctuary for sleep now. The scent lingers, a reminder of his presence. There are nights when I find myself awakening, my hand resting between my thighs, in pursuit of a presence that eludes my grasp. As I linger on the porch, my mind drifts to the question of whether he ever contemplates my existence. Should he recall the flavor of my essence, the melodies I conjured amidst the rain, the manner in which I breathe his name, as if it were a cherished secret? We alone were worthy, yet I possess a deeper understanding. He is likely reconstructing in another location, in the company of someone more secure, and my daughter. She dispatches postcards. Brief and concise, respectful. Do not ever conclude with affection. At times I ponder whether my longing for her surpasses my yearning for the warmth of a gentle touch. At times I ponder whether the stillness is precisely what I have earned. He was the fiancé of my daughter, and I was the woman who selected deprivation in place of dignity. The injury remains unhealed. It merely transforms its form.